Here is the front half of a Bugatti Chiron Sport, and here is the rear half of a Bugatti Chiron Sport, and today we've got to connect both of them together.
The world said it couldn't be done. Bugatti said it shouldn't be done.
Can't do that in a garage. There's just a few places in the world with the right equipment and only a few people in the world with the right training to be able to do that.
But Mat Armstrong just pulled the tarp off a rebuilt Chiron.
You might have seen on the last main channel video that we started rebuilding the Bugatti Chiron Sport.
And the response from Bugatti's CEO was anything but a congratulatory handshake.
With ideas, it's easy to have the idea to make a car, but the process to get there, putting electric powertrain in, totally was the wrong way.
We're witnessing an unprecedented clash.
Any other car you'll be able to buy your own parts for. You can't finance like a crash damaged car.
Between a YouTube titan and one of the most prestigious car makers on earth. Is this a victory for the right to repair? Or has Mat just made a multi-million-dollar mistake? The $4 million execution. Alex G was cruising the streets of Miami in his Bugatti Chiron Sport and enjoying life as the owner of one of the rarest cars on the planet. This specific model is limited to just 60 units worldwide, and it costs a staggering $4 million because it is built to be the absolute peak of automotive engineering. Everything changed in a split second when a small Japanese delivery truck pulled out and caused a messy low-speed collision. It was the kind of accident that would be a simple fender bender for a normal car, but it turned into a nightmare for this multi-million-dollar hypercar. Even though the impact did not look like much, the front end was crunched and the airbags had deployed, which meant the car was now a very expensive paperweight sitting in a Florida warehouse. The factory in France does not play around when it comes to their reputation or the safety of their vehicles. They flew a specialist technician across the Atlantic Ocean just to inspect the wreckage and decide if the car could ever drive again. This person was not there to offer advice on a repair or to help Alex get back on the road, because Bugatti has a very strict philosophy about their brand. After a quick look at the damage, the verdict was brutal and final. They officially labeled the car a total loss, and then they took the extra step of blacklisting the vehicle in their global database. This move effectively erased the car from existence because it meant no authorized dealer anywhere in the world was allowed to sell even a single bolt or a plastic clip for this specific chassis.
That the Bugatti, it was impossible to buy parts directly from them.
On that chassis number of vehicle, they will not supply any components.
Then there was the part that really shocked the car community, which was the repair estimate from the factory. Bugatti told the owner that if he wanted the car restored to their standards, he would have to ship it all the way back to the workshop in Molsheim. The price they quoted for parts and labor was $1.7 million, which is enough money to buy a massive mansion or a whole fleet of brand-new cars. They wanted $93,000 just for the horseshoe grille, and the headlights were priced at $58,000 each.
Headlights for a Chiron, €150,000. A bonnet, €50,000. And bumper, €80,000.
It felt like a ransom note designed to make sure the car stayed dead, because Bugatti does not want a salvaged or imperfect car carrying their logo. Alex was left in a terrible position because he was still paying nearly $90,000 every single month for a car that he was legally and mechanically forbidden from fixing. The factory assumed that the story was over and that the car would be sold for scrap at an auction, but they did not count on a YouTuber from the UK named Mat Armstrong. Mat has a reputation for bringing dead supercars back to life.
I bought my first ever crash damaged car and attempted to rebuild it. More difficult to work on and more rare.
And he saw the blacklist as a personal challenge rather than a stop sign. He hopped on a plane to Miami to see the car for himself.
Today, we're about to attempt what Bugatti think is impossible. This is the $6 million Bugatti Sport that was crashed by Alex.
Because he suspected that the unrepairable label was just a corporate tactic to protect their high profit margins. When Matt finally got his hands on the car, he realized
we're going to do it right here. That's it. We're going to start stripping it apart, whether Bugatti like it or not. We're going to continue anyway.
that the situation was even more intense than the internet realized. He found that the engine and gearbox had taken a hit that pushed the entire drivetrain forward by a fraction of an inch.
The broken gearbox, and now we've got to figure out a way of how we're going to fix that so we can put it all back together and join the front half back to the rear.
This tiny movement had caused a massive crack in a structural support bracket that Bugatti claimed was impossible to fix without replacing the entire rear end of the car. Matt was standing in front of a $4 million puzzle that the manufacturer said could never be solved. He was about to start a high-stakes game with the biggest boss in the industry to prove that even a Bugatti is just a machine made of bolts and wires. The hypercar. Ransom note. Matt is not the kind of person who takes no for an answer, especially when it comes to a car that everyone says is a lost cause. After he saw the crunched front end of the Bugatti in Miami, he started digging into the real numbers behind the repair, and what he found was enough to make even a millionaire dizzy. The official parts list from the factory looked like something out of a movie, because the prices were so high they did not even seem real. A pair of headlights was quoted at $174,000, which is more than the price of a brand new Porsche 911. Each front fender was another $200,000, and the tiny horseshoe grille was almost $100,000. When you add it all up, the bill for just the parts was over $1.7 million, and that did not even include the labor to put it back together. It was very clear that Bugatti was using these prices as a way to control who can own and fix their cars, because they want to keep everything behind a closed door. They told Matt and the owner, Alex, that the only way the car could ever be official again was to ship it to France and let the factory do the work their way. This is where the term hypercar tax comes from, because you are not just paying for metal and carbon fiber, but for the badge on the front. Matt realized that Bugatti was trying to bully them into giving up on the car so it could be erased from the road forever. But Matt has a secret weapon, because he knows that Bugatti belongs to the massive Volkswagen Group, which owns brands like Audi and Bentley. As Matt started pulling the car apart in his shop, he began to see things that the factory never wanted the public to find. He noticed that many of the small sensors and clips inside the $4 million Bugatti had the same markings as parts found in much cheaper cars. He even found a starter motor that looked exactly like the one used in an old diesel Volkswagen Jetta. While Bugatti charges tens of thousands of dollars for these items because they come in a fancy box, Matt knew he could find them for a few $100s if he just looked at the part numbers. This discovery was a huge blow to the idea that every single piece of a Bugatti is a unique piece of art. The tension finally broke when Alex posted a video on social media giving Bugatti a 24-hour ultimatum to unblacklist the car, or they would start 3D printing the parts themselves. This was a direct attack on Bugatti's business model because their whole brand is built on being exclusive and impossible to copy. If a guy in a shed could print a fender that looked just like the real one, the factory's $200,000 price tag would look like a total scam. The entire internet was waiting to see if the big bosses in France would call the police, or if they would finally start talking to the two guys who were tearing their masterpiece apart with basic hand tools. Dismantling the myth of impossible. Bugatti has always told the world that the Chiron is a machine of such extreme complexity that a regular human being should not even think about touching it. The factory in France maintains a very strict rule that there are only 2 places on the entire planet with the right equipment to split the car in half. They claim you need multi-million-dollar hydraulic cradles and laser-guided rails to separate the front carbon fiber section from the rear engine subframe. According to their official service manuals, Doing this job in a normal garage is a physical impossibility that would surely destroy the $4 million chassis. Mat Armstrong looked at those rules and decided to prove that grit and common sense are more powerful than a fancy brochure. Instead of ordering $1 million worth of specialized tools, Mat went to the corner of his workshop and grabbed a standard plastic rolling trash can base. He and his father used a basic 2-post lift and some scrap pieces of timber to support the massive W16 engine and the heavy gearbox. As they began to unbolt the car, the tension in the room was incredibly high, because if the car tipped or the engine fell, the project would be over in a second. Slowly and carefully, they started to pull the two halves apart, and the unthinkable happened. The wheels on the plastic trash can began to roll, and the front of the Bugatti slid away from the rear with the mechanical ease of a toy set.
This thing at all, but it is sitting on literal trash can rollers, a $6 million car.
This moment was a massive reality check for the entire car industry because it stripped away the mystery that Bugatti worked so hard to protect. By using a cheap bin and basic tools, Mat revealed that the Chiron is actually very modular and logical underneath all the expensive leather. As the two halves sat on the floor, they could finally see that the entire car is held together by only 14 primary titanium bolts.
So there are 14 bolts that separate this car in half. You can see the main center one being right here.
These are high-quality fasteners, but they are still just bolts that follow the same laws of physics as a normal car. The successful split exposed a secret that Bugatti did not want people to focus on, which is that the car is built to be taken apart. When Mat looked at the exposed drivetrain, he saw the true extent of the damage from the Miami crash. The impact had shoved the engine forward just enough to crush a series of coolant lines and fracture a structural aluminum engine mount. Bugatti's solution was to sell a completely new engine housing for over $1 million because they refused to sell individual brackets. Mat was now looking at a broken piece of metal that the factory called a death sentence, but he saw a puzzle that could be solved with a good welder and some clever engineering. The VW Passat Discovery. Once the two halves of the Bugatti were sitting on the garage floor, Mat and his dad began to perform a deep dive into the guts of the car. This was a moment that no regular person ever gets to see, because most Bugatti owners would never dream of letting a mechanic pull their car apart in a shed. As they started removing the outer layers of the engine, they began to find small components tucked away in the shadows of the W16 beast. What they found next was the ultimate proof that the hypercar world is full of secrets. Mat started pulling out sensors and electrical clips and noticed they looked very familiar, so he started checking the part numbers printed on the plastic. Instead of seeing unique codes that belonged only to a $4 million masterpiece, he saw the famous stamps of the Volkswagen Group. He found parts that were shared with much cheaper cars like Audis and Bentleys, which makes sense because Volkswagen owns all of them. But the biggest shock came when they looked at the starter motor, which is the part responsible for bringing that massive 16-cylinder engine to life. Mat held it up to the camera and showed that it was an identical match to the starter motor used in a Volkswagen Passat with a diesel engine.
Let's not forget to put the wires on this, else we're splitting the whole car again. The Volkswagen Passat starter motor.
This means, apart from a car that costs $30,000, was doing the heavy lifting for a car that costs $4 million. The discovery was a massive blow to the idea that every single piece of a Bugatti is a bespoke work of art forged in a special lab. Bugatti charges a huge markup for these parts simply because they come in a box with a fancy logo. But underneath the skin, the engineering is built on the back of the world's largest parts bin. Mat realized that he did not have to pay the factory tens of thousands of dollars for every little sensor or wire, because he could find the exact same items at a regular car parts store for a tiny fraction of the price. Welding the unweldable heart. Bugatti had been very clear about one thing since the beginning of this project, and that was the engine mount. The crash in Miami had pushed the massive drivetrain forward just enough to put a hairline fracture through the cast aluminum support bracket that holds the entire W16 engine in place.
I can't get this wrong. This is the engine mount from Alex's crashed Bugatti Chiron.
To the factory engineers in France, this crack was a total death sentence for the car because their official rulebook says you can never repair a structural cast component. They do not sell this bracket as a single part, so their only solution was to force the owner to buy a completely new engine and gearbox housing for over $1 million. They claimed the metal was a special alloy that would never hold a weld, and that any attempt to fix it would make the car a rolling hazard. Mat was not ready to throw away $1 million on a corporate rulebook, so he decided to seek a second opinion from a local expert named Bob. He took the broken engine mount to Bob's machine shop to see if the metal was truly as mysterious as Bugatti claimed. Bob looked at the stamps on the part and identified it as a specific type of aluminum and magnesium alloy known as A7 or I7. This was the moment of truth, because if the magnesium content was too high, the metal would simply bubble or catch fire under a welding torch.
So there's a little bit of magnesium in it, and you can see it floating to the top when I'm welding and just sort of bubbles to the surface of the weld.
Bob cleaned the surface and prepped the area while Mat watched with his heart in his throat, because the entire future of the car was riding on this one piece of metal. Bob started by heating the bracket in a special oven to make sure the entire piece of metal was at the same temperature, which prevents it from cracking further during the repair. He then began the delicate process of TIG welding the fracture using a 4047 filler rod, which is known for flowing smoothly into complex castings. To everyone's surprise, the metal took the weld perfectly, and the liquid aluminum flowed into the crack just like it would on any other high-end vehicle. Bob did not just stop at fixing the crack, though, because he decided to add extra aluminum ribs to the design to make the bracket even stronger than it was when it left the factory. This was a massive win for the right to repair movement, because it proved that the unweldable heart of the Bugatti was actually just a normal piece of engineering. And so, the engine was finally ready to be bolted back into the car, and Mat was one step closer to making the CEO of Bugatti eat his words. The CEO's response and the ghost's revival. The internet is used to big brands hiding behind a wall of lawyers, but Mate Rimac is a different kind of boss. As a young engineer who built his own supercar company from nothing, he personally monitors the social media landscape. While Bugatti's legal team likely prepared mountains of paperwork to stop the project, Rimac chose a different path. He sent a direct message to the car's owner, introducing himself as the CEO and opening a line of communication that caught the entire car world off guard. Rimac did not lead with threats. Instead, he focused on the cold, hard facts of physics. He explained that a 1,500 horsepower machine is effectively a land-bound jet that must be perfect to remain on the road. He issued a specific warning about the dangers of using homemade or 3D printed parts for the structural frame, arguing that the extreme stress and heat of a W16 engine at 200 miles per hour would melt or snap most regular materials. He was not just protecting the brand's image, but was genuinely worried the car would become a death trap if the engineering was not handled with extreme care. For months, the Miami Bugatti had been a ghost, trapped in a digital prison by a VIN blacklist that blocked every authorized dealer from selling it a single part. But as the build went viral, the factory could no longer ignore the change in power. Millions of fans were rooting for the underdog, and Bugatti realized that keeping the car blacklisted would make them the antagonist in a global story. Bugatti finally lifted the ban in a massive policy reversal, effectively bringing the ghost back to life. The factory eventually offered a fair price for support, realizing it was better to help finish the car than to let a mystery version hit the road. This support came with a vital safety compromise, which was Bugatti provided the technical data and specific parts required, as long as Mat followed their strict safety standards for the most critical components. The soul of the machine was finally restored, and the path to the finish line was finally open, straight piping sacrilege. Mat and his father reached the point in the build where they had to make a choice about the soul of the car. The Bugatti Chiron is known for many things, but a loud and aggressive engine note is usually not one of them. Most people do not realize that the 4 massive turbochargers act like giant mufflers that soak up all the sound of the 16 cylinders. On top of that, the factory installs huge secondary catalytic converters that are designed to clean the air and keep the car quiet. For a normal owner, this is fine because they want a smooth and silent experience, but Mat wanted this specific car to sound as mean as it looked. He decided to perform what some people call automotive sacrilege by removing those converters and making the car as loud as possible. The team at Valvetronic reached out to help because they wanted to see if they could create the first truly custom exhaust system for a Chiron per sport.
Hey folks, not too long ago we talked about different types of headers that you can install that'll help performance, sound, and looks of your ride. Once you get a good set of headers on there, you may want to upgrade the rest of the exhaust system as well.
They spent weeks using 3D scans and complex computer designs to create a one-of-one masterpiece made of polished metal. When the box finally arrived at the shop, it looked more like a piece of high-end art than a car part. It featured a special X-pipe design and 6 exhaust tips to handle the massive amount of air that the engine moves at high speeds. Mat knew that by installing this system, he was moving even further away from the factory's vision of a perfect, quiet luxury car. One of the biggest risks of this move was the sensors that monitor the engine. If you remove the catalytic converters on a car this complex, the computer often goes into a limp mode because it thinks something is broken. Mat had to be very careful because there were no sensors after the secondary converters, which meant the car might not even know they were gone. He and his dad spent hours under the car, cutting and fitting the new pipes while trying to avoid any mistakes that could lead to a permanent warning light on the dashboard. They were bringing a bit of a driveway vibe to a car that was built in a sterile laboratory, and the contrast was amazing to watch. As they pulled the heavy factory mufflers off, they realized just how much weight they were saving. The original Bugatti parts are incredibly heavy because they are packed with sound-dampening material and precious metals used for emissions. Mat joked about selling the metal inside the old converters to help pay for more parts. But his real focus was on the first start. Everyone in the car world knows that Bugattis are not typically famous for sounding good, and many people think the turbos kill the noise entirely. Mat was betting that by opening up the airflow, he could find a hidden roar that nobody had ever heard from a W16 engine before. The installation of the Valvetronic system was the final piece of the mechanical puzzle before the car was truly a whole unit again. And just like that, Mat did what no one thought was possible: the right to repair manifesto. The journey to fix this Bugatti was never just about a car, but about a much bigger fight over who truly owns the things we buy. In the modern world, companies use software and special locks to keep people from fixing their own property, and this is called digital rights management. When Bugatti blacklisted the car at the start, they were using a digital kill switch to turn a physical object into a paperweight. This project became a symbol for the right to repair movement because it showed that even the most expensive machine on Earth is still just a collection of parts. Mat was fighting for the idea that if you have the skill and the tools, you should have the right to turn a wrench on your own engine without a factory representative telling you no. One of the most famous moments in this entire battle came down to a single piece of metal that cost only $11. While Matt was putting the two halves of the car back together, he was using a torque wrench to tighten a vital titanium bolt into the carbon fiber tub. Because these bolts are made to be very light and brittle, so they snap during a crash to protect the driver, they are incredibly easy to break if you make a tiny mistake. Matt applied just a little too much pressure, and the head of the bolt snapped right off, leaving the thread stuck deep inside the $4 million frame. It was a heart-stopping moment that could have forced them to pull the entire car apart again just to fix one small error. Instead of calling the factory and waiting weeks for a special replacement, Matt found a high-quality titanium bolt online for just $11. He managed to extract the broken piece and replace it with a part that was just as strong as the original but cost a tiny fraction of the price. This $11 bolt became a massive middle finger to the idea of the hypercar tax. The success of the build has started a massive debate among other supercar owners who are tired of being bullied by factories. People are realizing that if a Bugatti can be repaired in a garage with grit and common sense, then there is no excuse for other brands to lock out their customers. Matt's workshop became a manifesto for a new era of ownership, where the person behind the wheel has the final say. He proved that no matter how much a car costs, it is still subject to the laws of physics and the skill of a determined mechanic. The $11 bolt was a small victory, but it represented a giant leap for everyone who believes in the freedom to fix. War of the Worlds. The victory of getting the car back on the road did not come without a massive fight from the people who sit at the very top of the automotive world. As Matt's videos gained millions of views, a divide began to form between elite purists and the next generation of fans. The whole saga went beyond just one car into the unwritten rules of the hypercar industry. The old-world collectors who believe a Bugatti must be serviced only by the factory to maintain its multi-million-dollar value viewed the project as a threat to the brand's prestige. To them, a Bugatti is either factory perfect or it is nothing, and a garage-built Chiron risked devaluing the entire market. The technical community was equally divided. While fans cheered for the underdog, factory-trained engineers looked at the trash can method and the local welding of the engine mounts with genuine concern. They argued that even if the car looked functional, it was now a 261 mile-per-hour safety risk.
This is a car that defies the laws of both physics and economics. It is the fastest production car on the planet. Right now, it is limited for the road to a speed of only 261 miles an hour.
These critics claimed that independent fixes were an insult to the thousands of hours of research that went into the machine's original engineering. This created a massive argument between a world that believes only the manufacturer can touch a masterpiece and a new world that believes in the fundamental right to repair. This tension eventually forced Mat Armstrong to step in. As the CEO, he found himself caught between his most loyal billionaire customers and a viral superstar. While purists wanted the project shut down to protect the brand, Matt was proving that the factory's rules were often a corporate illusion. This conflict actually influenced Armstrong's vision for the company's future. When he unveiled the new V16 Tourbillon, he shifted the focus toward a more analog and mechanical design that felt like a reaction to the very grit Matt was showcasing in his shed. This saga proved that the ivory tower has finally crumbled. You no longer need an exclusive invitation to understand how a hypercar works. One man has a factory, and the other has a toolbox, and while they started as enemies, they ended up proving the same point. A car is only as good as the person willing to master its complexity. Matt fixed a broken car, but he did more than that in reality. He broke a gatekeeping system that had stood for decades. So now that you've seen the trash can split the car in half, and the CEO himself step in, it leads to one massive question. If you pay $4 million for a car, should the factory still have the right to tell you how to fix it? Or is Bugatti right to protect their name at all costs? And more importantly, knowing what you know now, would you actually trust a car fixed in a shed at 260 miles per hour? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.